people who eat cheese live longer?
What is the best cheese you could eat?
I love cheese.
Or could cheese be one of the unhealthiest foods that people eat?
People are even more addicted to cheese than they are sugar.
So I decided to fly to Switzerland to visit one of their oldest cheese factories, Gruyeres Cheese, to figure out what's up with Swiss cheese and to find out why the Swiss outlive all the other top cheese producing and consuming countries in the world. Surprisingly, fermented dairy, like cheese, may actually be beneficial for the health to reduce cardiovascular disease and colon cancer, despite it being a high sodium and high saturated fat food. All right, if you're not a cheese person like me, I don't really see the need to start, but if you want to eat cheese, you really need to go get some quality cheese. Come with me inside to La Maison du Gruyere to see how they actually make real cheese. Wow, look at this pretty blue cow. Apparently the Swiss, they don't have a national animal, but if they had one, it would probably be the cow. Now, I do think the stress of the animal plays a big role in the quality of the food. So the Swiss cattle, they get to roam the Swiss Alps and graze all day long. They actually don't even brand their cattle. It's actually illegal. Instead, they have these cow bells. You can imagine that the milk would taste super different if they're eating a bunch of herbs like wild thyme and lavender, as opposed to just the hay and whatever supplements that our cows are eating in America. It's amazing. I was walking by several cows. Their poop actually doesn't smell. But yet, when you walk by cattle farms in America, you could be a couple of miles away and you can smell those farms. So when you see the Swiss alpine sign, you know that cattle was grazing amongst the Swiss alpine grass and herbs, and it has a relatively pretty low-key life, right? Pretty happy-go-lucky grazing in the Swiss Alps. No wonder they have 5 times more omega-3 fatty acids when they looked into 41 different cheeses on the market. I heard that they have cow parades in which the cows parade down the Alps during wintertime so that they can be kept safe, and they adorn them with fancy bells and fancy crowns. All right, so on the right-hand side is a gift shop, it seems like, and the left, oh, look, it's a pretty cute little cafe. I heard you can get fondue in here, but let's go to the audio tour. Okay, when you walk in, it's adorned with all these pictures of the history of Gruyere cheese. Now, I found out that Gruyere cheese was actually made by nobles. This traditional cheese-making process is still used today to make the current modern-day Gruyere cheese. Now, one would think that you can make cheese with any kind of dairy milk. You could do that, but the quality of the milk and the quality of the food the cows actually eat will determine the quality of the cheese that you're eating. So the reason why Swiss alpine cheese is so special is because the cattle, they graze on the Swiss Alp grass, as well as the thousands of different herbs that are in the Swiss Alps. This is why when you eat Alpine Swiss cheese, there could be 75 different flavors. You're actually eating the nutrients found in the Swiss Alp grass and herbs. And these are just images of how the Swiss appreciate their cows, because they eat a lot of cheese and they like their chocolate. The unique thing about Swiss dairy cattle is that it is from a specific breed of brown cows. Now, these cows are apparently one of the oldest dairy breeding cows. Oh, and this little guy, well, look at that, very interesting. That is a work dog, and that dog is pulling the milk. And it's interesting to see our relationship with animals, how it has evolved, where these days people are putting dogs in baby carriages and pushing them down the street instead of having them walk. So I think this is just pictures of how the nobles would eat cheese. In the old days, it was a prized rare commodity, and people have dramatically increased their cheese production, right? Like this guy has bigger vats, and today the vats are even bigger. Interesting, this tour was very educational in helping me appreciate how the Swiss look at their food. They emphasize smell, taste, sight, touch, as well as hearing. So this is now where all the milk is kept. 22 farms deliver fresh milk daily to this cheese factory. The farmers have to raise their cattle in the Swiss alpine meadows that are 2,400 feet above sea level. Each of these giant vats holds almost 4,800 liters of milk. That's 1,268 gallons of milk per vat. So each cow has to eat 100 kilograms of grass, which is like 220 pounds of grass, and they need to drink 85 liters of water every day to produce 25 liters of milk, or 6.6 gallons of milk. So if you do the calculations, that means 192 cows produce milk for one vat. There are 22,000 dairy farms in Switzerland. The entire country has 587,000 cows, producing 3.5 billion kilograms of milk every year. Swiss-produced milk are more expensive than even European Union milk. The Swiss, they treat their animals more humanely because they have a Swiss milk green industry production standard, which became mandatory as of this year. And before that, their farmers were incentivized to follow these standards by rewarding them with higher prices for their goods. In America, we have 24,000 dairy farms, and we produce 226.6 billion pounds of milk every year. And what do we feed our cattle? Silage, grains, and protein-rich supplements.
Honestly, I've never believed that cheese could be a longevity food, as Americans are one of the largest consumers of cheese, and we have one of the worst lifespans compared to all the other first world developed countries. Not only that, but the longest lived people are still in Asia, and they don't eat cheese as a part of their diet. In fact, in Chinese, there isn't even a word in Chinese called cheese. Traditionally, animals and animal products were food for the wealthy. You can imagine my surprise when I found out that Switzerland is the largest consuming cheese per capita and yet remains one of the top 5 longevity countries in the world. Like all food, it comes down to the quality of the ingredients and what you do with them to make it into the food you're eating. Now, here is the confusion. Cheese is a highly processed food, depending on how you process that cheese. But the processing of the cheese still retains many important health-promoting nutrients. Now, if the cow eats the right kind of foods. However, in America, we ultra-process the cheese. We add emulsifiers, and then we add starches and gums that actually have a different metabolic effect when we eat those foods. It's kind of like cereal. You start with the whole grain that has fiber, bran, as well as the germ that has a lot of protein, but you strip those beneficial ingredients, and then you end up with the starch, the energy molecule. And we've apparently done that with many dairy products. And on top of that, when you add more added sugars as well as artificial ingredients, you've now transformed either that grain or dairy into a metabolic time bomb. So to me, whether or not you're eating American cheese, that's highly processed, or you're eating vegan cheese, that's highly processed, both are not really real food. They are single ingredient products put together to look like cheese, to smell like cheese, but it really has nothing to do with the health benefits of how the Swiss have made their cheese for centuries.
If you decide to come visit Mason du Gruyere, they actually have tours before 12:30 every day. They produce cheese 2 to 4 times a day, and each cheese production is about 2.5 hours. So real cheese is made out of 4 basic ingredients: milk, cultures, rennet, and salt. Now they start with raw cow's milk. That milk is put into these big giant vats to be stirred and heated. They carefully monitor the temperature and acidity. They actually add rennet to help the cheese curdle. Rennet is a liquid from a cow's stomach. Essentially, rennet has a complex set of enzymes that digest the casein protein in dairy. Now, casein is the reason why you don't want to add milk to coffee or milk to tea. They actually can bind polyphenols and inhibits your absorption of these polyphenols. Now, when you eat cheese, it actually can increase your polyphenols as opposed to milk, which decreases polyphenols. The way Gruyere cheese is made here is a traditional way that people used to make cheese. But when you turn over cheeses that are made in the modern way, you'll see a list of ingredients that are disturbing because people are manipulating the chemistry of cheese making to make something that looks like cheese, tastes like cheese, but they don't go through the whole cheese making process. If they don't add rennet, they don't actually break down the casein protein. And if they don't ferment the cheese, then it doesn't further break down the molecules in the dairy to offer the same health benefits. As you can see, there is nothing raw about this cheese. The curd is heated to 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 to 45 minutes. Eating raw dairy products without actually cooking it and treating it properly can lead to major health consequences. In fact, that is a great way to get food poisoning, lifelong irritable bowel, Listeria meningitis, E. coli, Campylobacter, Guillain-Barré syndrome, and reactive arthritis. Now, look at the cheese maker. It is stirring and cutting the cheese in giant copper vats. Those grates are called cheese harps that actually are like knives to cut the curds into tiny kernels as it is heated. And look at the color of the vat. It's actually copper colored because it is made out of copper. Apparently, copper allows the even distribution of heat in the liquid. It is also antimicrobial. Amazingly, copper has been known to be antimicrobial since ancient times. Copper also allows the liquid to have an even distribution of heat, and since it is a reactive metal, it actually oxidizes the acids in the milk, and this gives the cheese its flavor. So small amounts of copper are actually leached into milk, and this is why cheese is a source of copper. Unfortunately, the ingestion of copper has been linked to dementia. Now, obviously, the dose makes the poison. Switzerland and the USA both made it on the list of top 20 countries with the highest rates of dementia. I just find that to be an interesting fact. Now, these cheesemakers are constantly testing the cheese to find the right consistency. You see those white bins in the back? Those are the round cheese molds. So the liquid, which is called the whey, and the curds are both pumped into these white containers. Do you see the liquid draining from the first vat? And now the whey is drained from the molds. It's like a river of milk whey. They can only use each of these vats once a day. So they make the cheese in the morning and they store the milk in the evening. Now that milky liquid is the whey. There is still protein in that whey.
Guess what they do with their whey protein? It's actually a waste product of cheese making, and they feed it to pigs to fatten them up. That's why I'm really surprised that Americans will add whey protein to their drinks as a protein supplement.
There is so much condensation in the room that it's getting really foggy and it's very hard to see. And now the cheese is left to be sealed for about 20 hours to be gradually pressed to further remove more water. And then this whole wheel is soaked into a salt brine bath for about a day, and then they go into the cellar. Amazingly, 7,000 cheese wheels maturing in their cellar. Wow, I didn't realize that Gruyere cheese was lactose-free. This makes sense since most of the lactose is in the whey liquid, which was disposed of, and apparently fermentation actually will ferment the rest of the lactose that's left over in the cheese. Now they say in order for Gruyere to fully develop its flavor, it may take several months. I guess some of these cheese wheels have matured for over 15 months. That's a lot of cheese wheels. Apparently, we can change what we feed our cattle to reduce the carbon dioxide emission. And in Switzerland, they do this by feeding them real cow food in the Swiss Alps, the herbs. But at UC Davis, they're actually experimenting with feeding cattle seaweed. And no, apparently their milk doesn't taste bad. And so this is their gift shop, and these ladies are cutting the cheese wheels. And you can buy these as individual pieces. I've seen this in the supermarkets in Switzerland as well.
Now, what I noticed is that when I went shopping for cheese, even at the shops in the train station, the cheese aren't shredded or sliced nicely like American cheese, but instead these cheeses are shaved or they're sold as blocks of cheeses in imperfect cuts. However, no matter how you slice it, dairy does not reduce the carbon dioxide emissions made by dairy cows, as well as the estrogen pollution in the waste of dairy cows that pollute both the waters and the soil. Now, when you're buying cheese, there are different ways to look for cheese. Number one are hard cheeses versus soft cheeses. They have different effects on the body. Number two, cheese are separated into full-fat cheese versus low-fat cheese. These two have different metabolic effects on the body. Now, first, let's talk about full-fat cheeses. So when you buy full-fat cheeses, there are certain nutrients that require fat to be absorbed. So if you get rid of the fat, you actually get rid of that nutrient. Let's take, for example, vitamin A. Dairy is actually one source of vitamin A in the American diet. Vitamin A is a fat-soluble vitamin. So if you remove the fat, you've essentially removed the vitamin A in the dairy. Vitamin A is a super important immunity as well as longevity vitamin. It is responsible for that red, yellowish, orange color in your fruits and vegetables. And in case you were wondering, green vegetables also have a ton of vitamin A. That's why when the chlorophyll denatures, the leaf turns yellow. That is vitamin A. It's beta carotene. And how do cows get it? Where they're feeding on green vegetables all day long. So they're getting a ton of beta carotene in their diet. And that goes into their dairy milk that they make. In America, we definitely are underestimating the amount of vitamin A that we need. Take a look at acne, right? And how many people are taking Accutane, which is a derivative of vitamin A. Acne is not a rite of passage for all teenagers around the world. It's basically in countries in which animals and animal products, as well as processed foods, are a predominant part of their diet. Having adequate amount of vitamin A is important to prevent infectious diseases because countries in which eat low amounts of vitamin A actually have high rates as well as more severe cases of measles. So if your only source of vitamin A is through dairy, you may want to reconsider because dairy is actually linked to higher rates of acne. And guess what? Skim milk is worse than full-fat milk. It's really thought that the protein in milk is responsible for acne because people who take whey protein supplements also have higher cases of acne. So if you're getting more acne, you may want to reconsider that protein supplement you're taking or how much dairy you're drinking. Now, a lot of people are worried about their hormones, right? Or they're worried about the estrogenic effects of milk, such as in soy milk. Well, the good news is soy milk doesn't have any estrogen. It actually has phytoestrogens that can counteract the effects of your own estrogen. So it helps you reduce the negative effects of mammalian estrogen. Whereas if you drink animal milk, that is actually full of estrogen. Think about it. It's an animal, right? And it's also a female animal. So if you're consuming a lot of dairy products, then you're going to get more estrogen from your food. Estrogen has been linked to decreased fertility rates in both men and women. And if your child's getting a lot of middle ear infections, you may want to rethink giving them milk because it's been linked to having more middle ear infections in childhood, possibly because of milk allergies. Now, besides vitamin A, fermented cheese actually has probiotics. And that's why a lot of people think that it may be more helpful than eating non-fermented dairy products. This means that the probiotics can influence the health of your gut microbiome. However, if you heat up the cheese, so if you're eating pizza or let's say a grilled hamburger or quiches, mac and cheese, fondue, well, you've basically killed the microbe. So it doesn't actually help with your gut health. So you have to consume the cheese raw. But not all raw cheeses are alike, right? Because if your cheese has been contaminated by Listeria, well, that's not going to improve your health. In fact, that is quite deadly. So people who are pregnant or immunocompromised should really avoid soft cheeses. Soft cheeses have more water, have lower pH, and are less acidic. So it can grow more pathogenic bacteria that can be quite deadly. Now, another difference in Swiss cheese is that it's aged. Aged cheeses have more microbes. And aged cheeses are drier, they're saltier, and they have higher pH. So it inhibits the growth of pathogenic bacteria. But because they're saltier, they raise your blood pressure. That's why if you have high blood pressure, you really need to consume cheese in moderation. Now, cancer is the second leading cause of death around the globe. And unfortunately, it soon will probably be the first leading cause of death, even higher than cardiovascular disease. So if you're worried about cancer, you really need to know the effects of dairy on cancer. So number one, if you're worried about colon cancer and you're a dairy consumer, just know that consumption of dairy actually reduces your risk of colon cancer. It's thought to be because dairy has calcium, and somehow that confers a protective effect. Okay, but you can't get too excited because guess what? Dairy consumption is associated with a higher rate of both breast cancer and prostate cancer.
Doctors say the high-fat dairy product contains high levels of estrogen, which research shows can lead to increased risk of both diagnosis and death from breast cancer.
You're either going to have a breast or you're going to have a prostate. So either way, you should understand that if you're higher risk of having breast or prostate cancer, then you really need to reconsider eating dairy. Now, as I mentioned, diet quality is super important. So if your diet is full of animal products and animal fats, then dairy is actually considered to be beneficial, and it can help you reduce cardiovascular disease as well as your risk of diabetes. But if you're on a whole food plant-based diet, well, I don't think that it's going to add any more benefit to your already pretty good healthy diet. However, just know that you can't simply just eat any dairy, right? There are thousands of different dairy products, from full-fat dairy to low-fat dairy to fermented dairy to non-fermented products. But in fact, fermented dairy seems to be much healthier than non-fermented dairy. But even amongst fermented dairy products, right, like cheese, some actually are fermented and others are not, right? They're chemically done to create the mouthfeel of cheese, the smell of cheese, the taste of cheese, but it's really not cheese at all. So if you're eating cheese with a laundry list of ingredients with emulsifiers, guar gums, artificial colors, artificial flavors, and starches, are you really eating cheese, or are you just eating junk food? Now, I think of the poster child of artificial cheese products like mac and cheese in a box or those cheese whips. Seriously, do you think that eating those processed cheeses will give you the same health benefits as the Swiss Alpine cattle grazing on Swiss Alpine grass? In fact, Swiss Alpine cheese has 5 times more omega-3 fatty acids than regular cheddar cheese. Now, diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids are known to reduce the rate of heart disease. And this is one reason why it's thought that people who consume real cheese have a lower rate of heart disease compared to those who eat a predominantly meat-based diet. Now, of course, the omega-3 fats come in no comparison to eating seafood like the Japanese. But considering that the average Western diet gets less than 2 grams of omega-3 fats on a daily basis, getting 500 milligrams is actually a lot of omega-3 fats in their diet. But of course, if you're eating flax seeds and walnuts, you're also getting a ton of omega-3 fats in your diet. Now, when I went looking for cheese, even at the train stations, they didn't have shredded cheeses that look like American shredded cheese. Now, if you look at the back of a package of American shredded cheese, no matter the cheese, you'll find starches and gums to separate these cheeses. The Swiss didn't have those kind of shredded cheeses. Their cheese looked more kind of crumbly, and they may have put wheat, but most of the time, it was just cheese. They also don't have the pretty, thinly, like cookie cutter slices of cheese that Americans have in our supermarkets. But instead, their shaved cheeses actually look pretty. They look like roses, or they are just coarsely cut. And most of their cheeses are just blocks of cheeses or wedges of cheeses. So you have to be a little suspicious after you come to Europe and see what they really eat as cheese compared to what is served in the American supermarket. So if you want to know what else is different in Switzerland, watch the next video.